Hold on, before skipping past this, what if the one fruit most people toss aside or drink in the absolute worst way is the very thing that could stop a heart attack from quietly building inside right now? Because here's the thing that most doctors don't have time to explain in a 10-minute checkup. A perfectly normal cholesterol number on paper does not mean those arteries are safe, not even close. There is something happening inside artery walls that standard blood tests simply don't catch. And today, that's exactly what we're going to walk through together, slowly, clearly, and without the scary medical jargon. Welcome to Health Bloom, the place where real health conversations happen, the kind of conversations that feel like sitting with a trusted friend who just happens to know a lot about what's going on inside the body.
Today's episode is one of those that might genuinely change how things look at the fruit section at the grocery store. And by the end, there's a very good chance of walking out with something that most people walk right past. If this is a first visit here, a very warm welcome. And if this community has been a part of someone's health journey for a while, thank you from the heart. Please take a moment to subscribe and hit the like button. It truly helps more people find this content. Now, let's get into it, because the story of this one fruit and what science discovered about it 2 decades ago is honestly one of the most fascinating and important things in the world of heart health. Part 1. The perfect cholesterol trap. So let's start with something that trips up millions of people every single year. The doctor runs a routine blood panel, reviews the numbers, looks up and says, "Cholesterol looks great." And there's this huge wave of relief, right?
But here's the part of the story that rarely gets told in those short appointments. Cholesterol, LDL specifically, isn't dangerous just because it exists. It becomes dangerous when it gets oxidized. Think of it like this. A fresh apple sitting on the counter is perfectly fine. But leave that same apple cut open, exposed to air, within minutes it starts turning brown. That browning, that's oxidation. And that is exactly what happens to LDL cholesterol when it gets exposed to certain conditions inside the bloodstream. Scientists have a name for this process. They call it the rust factor. And once that LDL cholesterol becomes oxidized, once it rusts, it transforms from a neutral passenger in the blood into something the body treats like a foreign invader. The immune system sees oxidized LDL and panics. It sends in the troops, white blood cells called macrophages, to try to clean it up. But here's the cruel twist that makes this such a serious problem for so many people over 40.
Let's walk through what's actually happening inside those artery walls right now. These are 5 mechanisms, 5 quiet, invisible processes that most people never hear about. And together, they tell the real story of how arterial plaque actually builds. The first mechanism is what researchers call the foam cell trap. When those macrophages rush in to clean up oxidized LDL, they start swallowing it. But they can't stop. They keep engulfing more and more oxidized cholesterol until they become so full they literally transform. These overstuffed macrophages turn into what are called foam cells, and they look exactly as the name suggests under a microscope, all bubbly and bloated. These foam cells then die right there inside the artery wall, leaving behind a sticky, fatty deposit. That deposit becomes the foundation of arterial plaque. And this is happening completely silently. No pain, no warning, no alarm going off in the body. Just a slow, quiet buildup that can go undetected for years, even decades.
The second mechanism is called endothelial dysfunction. The endothelium is the incredibly thin inner lining of every blood vessel, just one cell thick.
It's delicate, smooth, and when healthy, it acts like a non-stick surface inside the arteries. But when oxidized LDL begins to irritate and damage that lining, tiny cracks appear, and those cracks become entry points. Oxidized cholesterol molecules slip underneath that lining, and once they're in, they're very hard to get back out. The damage begins accelerating. Third is what's called the inflammatory cascade. Once that endothelium is damaged, the body triggers a full inflammatory response. Cytokines, chemical messengers, are released. More immune cells rush to the scene. The artery wall thickens as it tries to protect itself. This inflammation isn't always reflected in standard cholesterol tests. A person can have a completely normal LDL reading and still have significant chronic inflammation quietly hardening their arteries. That's the gap that catches so many people completely off guard. The fourth mechanism involves something called smooth muscle cell migration. In a healthy artery, smooth muscle cells stay in the middle layer of the vessel wall where they belong. But when inflammation flares up, these cells get a chemical signal telling them to move. They migrate inward toward the artery's inner surface, and once there, they start producing collagen, the same protein that forms scar tissue. This makes the plaque harder, thicker, and even more obstructive. The artery is essentially scarring itself from the inside out. And the fifth mechanism, perhaps the most fascinating one to understand, involves an enzyme called PON1. This little-known enzyme is produced by the liver and travels in the bloodstream attached to HDL, the so-called good cholesterol. PON1 is essentially the body's own antioxidant sniper. Its job is to find oxidized LDL and neutralize it before it can do damage. Think of it as a built-in bodyguard patrolling the bloodstream, disarming the oxidized cholesterol before the foam cell trap can be triggered. The problem is that as people age, especially after 40, PON1 activity naturally declines. Processed foods, chronic stress, poor sleep, and environmental toxins all suppress it further. So that internal bodyguard starts going to sleep, and the rust factor runs unchecked. Now, here is where the story gets really remarkable. In the early 2000s, a clinical trial was published that made researchers stop and take notice. It was a small study, but the results were striking enough that it sparked decades of follow-up research. The study, conducted in Israel by Dr. Michael Aviram and his team at the Technion Institute, involved patients with carotid artery stenosis, meaning significant plaque buildup in the arteries leading to the brain. These were people at serious risk. One group consumed a specific amount of a particular fruit extract daily for 1 year. The control group didn't. At the end of that year, when researchers measured the carotid intima media thickness, essentially the plaque thickness, something remarkable had happened. The group consuming the fruit extract showed an average reduction in arterial plaque of up to 30%. 30%! Not a slowing of plaque growth, an actual reversal. Meanwhile, the control group saw their plaque continue to increase by about 9%. What was this fruit? It was pomegranate, the most hated fruit in the produce aisle, the one that most people avoid because it seems too messy, too complicated, too hard to open, or too sour. The fruit that gets overlooked every single week at the grocery store. Part 4. Why pomegranate is so powerful. So what is it about pomegranate that gave such dramatic results? The answer lies in a group of polyphenols, plant compounds, that are uniquely concentrated in pomegranate. The most important of these are called punicalagins and punicic acid.
Punicalagins are found almost nowhere else in nature at these concentrations. They are the precursors to ellagic acid, and they are extraordinarily potent antioxidants, 3 times more powerful than red wine and green tea in terms of antioxidant activity. These compounds do something very specific that directly addresses the 5 mechanisms described earlier. They inhibit the oxidation of LDL cholesterol, essentially preventing the rusting process from starting in the first place. They target the rust factor at its root. But the benefits don't stop there. Pomegranate has also been shown in research to increase PON1 activity, actually waking up that sleeping enzyme bodyguard and boosting its ability to patrol the bloodstream and neutralize oxidized LDL. On top of that, pomegranate reduces the inflammatory signals, the cytokines, that trigger the cascade leading to smooth muscle cell migration and artery wall thickening. It's essentially addressing multiple steps of the plaque building process simultaneously. And there's one more property worth knowing about. Pomegranate has been shown to reduce the adhesion of monocytes, a type of white blood cell, to the damaged endothelium. Essentially, it helps repair that inner lining and makes it harder for plaque to get a foothold. Part 5. The critical warning. How 99% of people are doing it wrong. Now this is the part that is absolutely critical to understand, because the way most people consume pomegranate doesn't just fail to deliver these benefits, it may actually make things worse. And the irony is, most people think they're doing something healthy. Walk down the juice aisle of any supermarket, and there it is, pomegranate juice, brightly colored bottles, heart healthy printed right on the label. It looks like exactly the right choice. But here's the problem, hidden behind that attractive packaging. Commercial pomegranate juice, the kind processed and bottled for mass market shelves, is typically made from concentrate. The heating and processing involved in that concentration step degrades a significant portion of the very polyphenols that give pomegranate its power. But that's only half the problem. The other half is the sugar content. A single 8-ounce glass of commercial pomegranate juice can contain 30 grams of sugar or more. That level of fructose, especially from a concentrated, rapidly absorbed liquid source, spikes blood sugar. And here is the cruel paradox. High blood sugar directly promotes the oxidation of LDL cholesterol. It increases inflammation. It suppresses PO1 activity. In other words, drinking that commercial pomegranate juice may be triggering the very mechanisms it's supposed to stop. The other major mistake? Throwing away the most medicinal part of the fruit. Most people consume only the arils, the little juice sacs, and discard everything else. But research suggests that the peel and the white pith contain the highest concentrations of punicalagins. That peel, the part almost universally thrown in the trash, has antioxidant activity that dwarfs even the juice of the fruit itself. Traditional medicine practitioners in parts of the Middle East and South Asia have been drying and using pomegranate peel as a remedy for centuries. Part 6. The right way to use pomegranate for heart health. So what's the right approach? The research that showed those remarkable plaque reversal results used a standardized pomegranate extract, a concentrated, cold-processed form that preserved the full polyphenol content. But there are also practical, everyday approaches worth knowing. The first and most accessible option is simply eating the whole fruit. Fresh pomegranate arils provide fiber, which slows the absorption of natural sugars and significantly reduces the blood sugar spike compared to juice. The polyphenols are intact, and it's genuinely delicious. The second option, increasingly popular and backed by solid research, is cold-pressed pomegranate juice made fresh at home without removing the seeds. Including the seeds in the pressing preserves more of the beneficial compounds and adds healthy fats from the seed oil. If choosing commercial juice, look specifically for cold-pressed, 100% pomegranate with no added sugars and not from concentrate. These are harder to find and more expensive, but the polyphenol profile is far closer to what the research used. Limit it to about 4 ounces daily. For those interested in a more therapeutic approach, pomegranate extract supplements standardized to at least 40% punic allogens are available. This is the form closest to what was used in the clinical trial. Always check with a doctor before adding any new supplement. And for the adventurous, pomegranate peel tea is a traditional preparation with impressive science behind it. Dried peel can be steeped in hot water for about 10 minutes. The flavor is earthy and astringent, but some people actually enjoy it. The polyphenol content is remarkable. Part 7. Building it into daily life, practical and realistic. Now, the question that always comes up at this point is, how much is actually needed? Based on the clinical research, beneficial effects were observed with an intake roughly equivalent to about 50 milliliters, about 1.7 ounces, of high-quality pomegranate juice daily. That's a small amount, about 3 tablespoons. It doesn't require drinking a large glass every day. A small amount of truly high-quality pomegranate, whether as whole fruit, real cold-pressed juice, or extract, used consistently, appears to be what made the difference in the studies. Consistency matters far more than quantity here. A small amount every single day will outperform a large amount taken occasionally. The polyphenols in pomegranate are water-soluble and don't accumulate in the body, so daily intake maintains the beneficial levels in the bloodstream. One practical tip: try adding pomegranate arils to morning oatmeal or yogurt. This pairs the antioxidants from the pomegranate with the fiber from the oats, a combination that amplifies the blood sugar stabilizing effect and makes the polyphenols even more effective. Another approach that works beautifully is adding a tablespoon of real pomegranate molasses, the kind with no added sugar, just reduced pomegranate juice, to salad dressings. It adds a deep, rich flavor and delivers a concentrated dose of beneficial compounds. It's also worth knowing that pomegranate's benefits are enhanced when consumed alongside other polyphenol-rich foods. Research suggests that combinations of plant antioxidants work synergistically, meaning the effect of pomegranate combined with, say, extra virgin olive oil is greater than either alone. Part 8. Who should be especially attentive? While pomegranate is broadly beneficial for cardiovascular health, there are some specific groups who may want to pay particularly close attention to this information. People in their 40s, 50s, and beyond, whose PON1 activity is naturally declining, represent the primary audience here.
Anyone who has been told they have borderline or elevated LDL, a family history of heart disease, high blood pressure, or metabolic syndrome should be especially interested in the research on oxidized LDL because standard treatment often doesn't address this specific mechanism. People who are currently on statin medications should know that statins address LDL levels, but not necessarily LDL oxidation. Having a good LDL number on a statin does not eliminate the risk from the rust factor. Pomegranate may offer complementary protection, though always discuss with a doctor. There is one important note of caution. Pomegranate can interact with certain medications, specifically blood pressure medications and statins, in a manner similar to grapefruit juice, by affecting liver enzymes that metabolize those drugs. Anyone on such medications should check with their healthcare provider first. For people with diabetes or insulin resistance, the sugar content, even in whole pomegranate, is worth monitoring. The fiber in the whole fruit makes it safer than juice, but portion awareness is still important. The extract form avoids the sugar issue entirely for those who need to be careful.
Let's be honest about what the science does and doesn't tell us, because responsible health information means being clear about the limits. The Aviram study and others like it show genuinely exciting results, but most pomegranate studies are relatively small in scale. The research strongly suggests a real cardiovascular benefit, particularly around LDL oxidation, PON1 activity, and endothelial function. Multiple independent research groups have replicated key findings, which gives confidence that these effects are real and not accidental. However, pomegranate is not a cure. It is not a replacement for a healthy diet, regular movement, quality sleep, and managing stress. It is one powerful tool in a larger toolkit. The most important thing is to think of it as a meaningful addition to an already health-conscious lifestyle. The Mediterranean dietary pattern, which happens to include pomegranate as one of its traditional foods, remains the most evidence-supported dietary approach for cardiovascular health overall. Pomegranate fits beautifully into that broader framework of whole foods and plant diversity.
It's also worth noting that arterial plaque doesn't appear overnight, and reversing it doesn't happen overnight either. The clinical trial showing 30% plaque reduction was conducted over 1 full year of consistent daily consumption. Patience and consistency are the real medicine here. So let's bring today's conversation home. The arteries, those remarkable, flexible highways that carry life through the body every single day, deserve real attention. Not just a cholesterol number, not just a statin prescription, but actual, targeted, meaningful nutritional care. What's been covered today is genuinely important and honestly underreported in mainstream health conversations. The rust factor, the 5 hidden mechanisms, the foam cell trap, the sleeping PON1 enzyme, these are real processes, and pomegranate is one of the rare foods that addresses all of them. The takeaway isn't to rush out and buy every pomegranate product in sight. It's to be thoughtful about how to consume it, avoiding the sugar-loaded commercial juices, choosing the whole fruit or quality extracts, and being consistent. Small, daily, smart choices compound over time.
Next time at the grocery store, consider pausing in front of those pomegranates, the ones that look a little intimidating, a little messy to peel, because the science says that underneath that tough exterior is one of the most powerful natural tools available for keeping the heart healthy and the arteries open. Thank you so much for spending this time here at Health Bloom today. This community is one that genuinely cares about health, not just surface-level health, but the deep, foundational kind that adds years and quality to life. That matters enormously, and it's why these conversations happen. If today's episode was useful, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. A spouse, a sibling, a close friend. Heart disease is still the #1 killer, and a lot of that is because important information like this doesn't reach the people who need it most. Hit the like button if this was helpful. It genuinely helps more people find their way here. Subscribe if Health Blue isn't yet a regular stop on the health journey. And leave a comment below with any questions, experiences with pomegranates, or topics that are important to explore next. Take care of that heart. Take care of those arteries, because a long, vibrant, healthy life doesn't happen by accident. It happens through the choices made day after day, one small, consistent, caring decision at a time. Until next time, stay well and keep blooming.